All right, here's what's going to happen. You ready for this? Eagles, week 17. You beat the Redskins to win the NFC East. Wild card round. You beat Carolina to avenge that loss. Divisional round. You beat Minnesota to avenge that loss. NFC Championship. You beat the undefeated Los Angeles Rams. Super Bowl 53. You beat the Patriots again to complete another improbable underdog run. If all that happens, I will admit the NFL is scripted. Because let's face it, that shit, it ain't fucking happening. But I'm going to talk about some trade rumors anyway. So that's what this video is going to be about. You know, at this point, all you're trying to do is win the NFC East and get hot for the playoffs. So at this point in time, I don't think Le'Veon Bell's going to happen. It seems like he's not going to report and sign that tender. He's not going to report before the trade deadline. He doesn't want to get hurt. I guess that's his thought process right now. I mean, he might come and he might sign the tender, but it's not looking good right now. And if you're Howie Roseman, you can't bank on him coming to the Steelers. You got to go make a move. So let's look at some guys who could potentially be available. Now, there's one guy that might be available that I'm actually pretty interested in, and that's Emmanuel Sanders from Denver. So if you can't get Le'Veon Bell, here's what I would suggest Howie Roseman to do. I would suggest going after a receiver and a running back and just not spending a lot of draft capital on those particular players. So there's been a lot of trade rumors about Devontae Parker in Miami. I'll pass on Parker. Go get me Emmanuel Sanders. I think pairing him on the outside with Alshon Jeffrey, him being kind of quick. I know he's 30 years old at this point, but him being quick on the outside to pair with Jeffrey, I think that's a good combination to have. You pair that with Ertz too. So right now, Carson Wentz, it's been the Zach Ertz and Alshon Jeffrey show. He hasn't really looked at anyone else. And if you bring an Emmanuel Sanders in here, I think he would help out. You'd have him for $10 million for next season. So you'd still have him for another year to be your number 2 in Philadelphia. So give me Sanders over Parker. Now, let's get into some running back options. All right, so one that's been pretty popular and been talked about is Jordan Howard of Chicago. And I'll tell you what, he would have been perfect for the fourth quarter in Sunday's game, a guy that can run in between the tackles, churn out that yardage, continue to move the chains, continue to churn the clock. That's the kind of back you're kind of looking for right now if you're the Eagles. If you can't get a Le'Veon Bell, go get the guy who's got some vision and close you out some games in the fourth. So Jordan Howard would be great. I'm just not really sold that the Bears would want to trade Jordan Howard. I mean, you got Tariq Cohen, and if you trade Jordan Howard, all of a sudden the Bears are in kind of a position that the Eagles are in where they don't really have that bruising back in the fourth quarter to close out a game. So I don't know if Chicago would be interested in doing that. I kind of feel like this is a little bit more unrealistic than some people think. I know that his name has been floated around, but I'd be curious to see if Chicago would really part with Jordan Howard. Some other names that I've written down. So I went and looked at every single depth chart, and I even talked about this with Brendan for a little bit in the film study that I'm going to release later tonight. So the names that I have written down, I went through all 32 teams. David Johnson is the name I've written down from Arizona, but I'm not so sure how realistic that's going to be considering he just signed his contract. I mean, if they want to go in full fire sale mode, maybe they consider getting rid of David Johnson. I don't think that's something that's going to happen. Atlanta, Tevin Coleman. It's been another name that's been floating around. But the Falcons have now won 2 in a row. Devontae Freeman is injured, and I don't think Coleman is going anywhere. Buffalo, LaShawn McCoy. It sounds like the Bills want a little bit too much for him, and he didn't even play last Sunday. So LaShawn McCoy, that's something at this point, I don't know if that's happening either. Amir Abdullah out of Detroit. This is realistic. Abdullah was a guy that I liked coming out of Nebraska, but in the NFL he's been kind of hurt. and he hasn't been able to stay on the field consistently. This would be an interesting name. But here's the thing, though. If you bring Amir Abdullah in, he's not going to be the guy that is going to close you out a ball game in the fourth quarter. LeGarrette Blount is a name I've written down. I mean, I don't think Detroit would trade him, considering what he's doing right now for them. I don't think they would part with him. An under-the-radar kind of name, Spencer Ware from Kansas City. He does have experience with Doug Peterson when Doug Peterson was the offensive coordinator there. Spencer Ware is not moving the needle. He's not going to do you much, but it is an option. Doug Martin from Oakland. Now, the thing about Doug Martin, it's not a sexy name at all. I mean, it's the muscle hamster. He hasn't really been relevant since his rookie season and that big game he had against Philadelphia a couple years back, Chip Kelly's final season. Doug Martin is on a one-year deal in Oakland. So if you trade for Doug Martin, you'd probably only have to give up a seventh because you'd have him for half a year, and that's it. He's a rental player. Chris Carson from Seattle. The reason why I have his name written down, I don't know if Seattle would part with him or not because they do have Rashad Penny. But Chris Carson looks like the best back on that team. And I was actually a little curious why they even drafted Penny in the first place because I like Chris Carson. I know he came off the injury for Seattle, but he was running pretty well for them. And they drafted Rashad Penny. So he's on a rookie contract. It might take a little bit more to go get a guy like him. If you can get him for a fourth-round pick, I'd consider that. Other names I've written down, I mean, I have Devontae Booker from Denver. I would not – that wouldn't do anything for me. And then Derrick Henry out of Tennessee. I'm not a Derrick Henry guy. I don't know if they would get rid of him or not. But he just doesn't fit the offense right now with the Titans. Titans trying to go to a zone blocking scheme, and he's not fitting that. He's not doing what they need him to do. So those are the names I've written down. Le'Veon Bell I don't think it's going to happen at this point. And if Le'Veon Bell doesn't happen, the Eagles, they could be in some trouble here. I don't know what they're going to do. Patrick Peterson also has announced that he kind of wants to stay in Arizona. That was a trade that I wasn't really crazy about anyway. I didn't want to give up a bunch of draft capital for a cornerback. I think the way the NFL is going right now, you need some offensive weapons. The Eagles are also sixth in the NFL in defense. The defense isn't the problem. It's the offense and scoring points. I believe they're 22nd right now. You got to start figuring out a way to start scoring more points. I know the defense collapsed and it was pathetic and Jim Schwartz was pathetic, but the offense is the problem right now, and that's what you need to address. So at this point, man, I don't know what the Eagles are going to do. They're kind of stuck with what they got. It's not looking pretty. I mean, the realist in me says, okay, maybe you can win the NFC East. Maybe you can win a playoff game, but you ain't getting further than that. And that's what I'm thinking right now. So Adrian Fedkiw,